Hey, welcome to Scooby-Topia. There's this vivid memory I have that won't leave. I was sick, too sick to go to elementary school that day, and it was raining. I was taken on the long drive to my grandmother's house for the day in a daze, barely able to do anything. The TV was turned boomerang, and an episode of the Scooby-Doo Show came on that I'd never seen before. I watched on, mentally foggy, as the episode got under my skin perhaps more than usual due to my sickly state, full of medicine. For some reason, the contents and atmosphere never left me after that day, and it's become one of the episodes most imprinted onto my mind that's not from the original series, something I always come back to because of how strong my memory is despite the episode itself not being one I revisit all that often. This is Mamba Wamba and the Voodoo Hoodoo, the 9th episode of the Scooby-Doo Show. I covered the 7th and 8th episodes back to back right before this video, and realized there was no better time to finally put ease to this old memory than right now. While I don't think anyone has requested Mamba Wamba in particular for the Scariest Villain series, you might consider this a light entry to that anyway, though it's not necessarily him that's so captivating. The episode takes inspiration from the short story Papa Benjamin, written by Cornell Woolrich under the pseudonym William Irish. Enough context clues in this episode can let us assume it probably takes place in New Orleans, Louisiana, just like the short story, which has been adapted numerous times. For this video, I looked at multiple adaptations, from radio dramas to TV episodes of the 40s and 50s, to get a good idea of how mediums have adapted the story before Scooby.
Who was it?
I don't know his name. They call him Papa Benjamin.
Sounds like a white man?
No, he was...
I don't know his full name. They call him Papa Benjamin.
Why did you kill him?
Because he was killing me.
It typically tells the tale of a nightclub performer, orchestra leader, or other type of musician who performs in the area, though not always Louisiana, and usually with a band. The main character will decide to try their hand at using some local voodoo to help with their failing act, typically performing an ancient, sacred voodoo chant that curses them, and people involved start getting picked off one by one, surrounded by leftover voodoo dolls. While the main character tries to kill Papa Benjamin to stop the curse and gets away with it, the curse still gets him in the end. I was surprised with how consistent this Scooby episode was with adapting the story points, down to the band in the episode using a sacred chant that summons their trouble before they each start disappearing and leaving voodoo dolls. The original story itself has quite a few issues in modern times, the way some adaptations handle race for instance, and just having that problem inherently by existing, as many of these were made 70 years ago, and I think Scooby's take is no different, perhaps just different versions of these issues. I think it's interesting to see what they did to adapt it though. While there's plenty more to discuss after, let's first look at what the episode did with the ideas of a band getting mixed up in the dangerous world of voodoo.
What do you mean?
He was killing me with voodoo.
We open up as the band at the focus of this adaptation plays, while the gang enjoy their performance in the audience. From Daphne, we find out the lead vocalist, Alex Super, is an old friend who finally made it as a rock star and invited them for free, rather than having to pay what would now be about $40 each with inflation. To give him a proper star quality, Alex is actually voiced by special guest Mickey Dolenz, who you might know as the drummer and lead singer of real-life band The Monkees, alongside Davy Jones, who previously had guested as himself. Just like in Papa Benjamin, Alex introduces their next number based on the ancient voodoo chant, in this case titled Mamba Wamba.
Mamba, Wamba, Unga Mamba, Unga Wamba, doing the Mamba, doing the Samba, Mamba, Wamba.
However, as they perform, wind flows through and the seemingly real Mamba Wamba himself appears, cursing them and taking Lila, their backup singer. This is a notable difference from the short story, as no such spirit will usually show up to warn or curse the lead directly. Only a normal-looking elderly man at the end typically provides a physical warning or danger, now changed to a stereotypical witch doctor. It's more complicated, but witch doctors could indeed be seen as a part of the voodoo or hoodoo culture found in Louisiana in a way, but not really looking like they have this one dressed, and probably not looking, well, white. The original story is again kind of inherently a little racist in ways as it was, and this change doesn't exactly help the case, though we can dump some of it on the villain here. Their manager Roger chastises them, saying he warned them, and Alex mentions even Lila predicted something evil might happen. She fills the role of the wife of the performer in the story who typically tries to stop her husband from performing the chant, though she normally doesn't face consequences outside of her husband dying at the end, even though she will often perform it with him. Lila previously received a note warning them to not play the chant, and to never return to Maison Dupré, the old southern plantation home she grew up in where Alex first heard the chant, else become one of the living dead. For more on Scooby-Doo's obsession with the South, plantation homes, and more old Americana, I have a whole video about that. Velma finds a voodoo doll identical to Lila, just as in the short story, seemingly proving how real the situation is. They realize they need to check the plantation to find her before she becomes a zombie. Velma suggests playing the song again to summon him, Roger adding that they can make a deal to never perform it after, but with how serious voodoo is, that sounds like more trouble than they should be dabbling with. They pull up to the plantation, which feels pretty abandoned, and the boys are told to set up the equipment. When it blows a fuse, they move to the next room where a zombie creeps up on them. Notably, this zombie is entirely identical to the zombie from the classic terrifying Where Are You episode Which is Which. The only difference being he's given a more fabulous pink makeover here. An actor's gotta work, and if he's good at the job, so be it. They run back terrified to tell the others, destroying the equipment in the process, meaning they can't play the chant now. While the boys are looking for clues, Mamba Wamba appears again with a voodoo doll of Roger now, throwing it at them as drums begin playing. Terrified, Roger runs out before he can be taken, but when they chase him down, they only find his hat remaining, and hear a shrill shriek sounding like Lila back inside. Unable to find her, they split up to hopefully find her before the ceremony, Daphne flirtatiously choosing to go with Alex. Down in the basement, Mamba Wamba seems to walk through the wall to appear to them, and they run into the zombie on the other side. Daphne tries to use some martial arts to scare them off, predating her live-action movie or What's New days. The spirit disappears and she celebrates, looking back to Alex only to realize he's gone, leaving only a voodoo doll. The zombie finds the boys, so they hide in a room until they find some dresses. Shaggy takes a look at his already fabulous costume and hands him an even more beautiful gown to try on. Unfortunately, he's not as fond of it as they are. Shaggy trips on a gourd instrument running away, causing the others to believe Mamba Wamba is coming, so they prepare a trap only to catch themselves.
Like who'd you expect, Mamba Wamba? Never mind.
The drums start up again and they realize the other two members are missing, finding voodoo dolls. They split up and Velma finds footprints back in the basement that lead into the wall, suggesting some entrance which Fred pushes through, though it seems they aren't alone. The boys with a froggy friend run from the drums and find themselves in the audience of the ceremony, Lila already being zombified while the other band members wait, though no Roger. Just like Roger wanted, Mamba Wamba has a contract for them to sign saying they'll never perform the chant again, which Lila warns of a fate like hers as she refused to sign, so Alex complies. The boys get found out, so they dress as witch doctors themselves, which, you know, and their froggy friend steals the contract, forcing Mamba Wamba to chase. He and his zombies fight the boys to try and get it first, the boys succeeding in freeing the band members, then jumping into the secret passage with the rest of the gang to safety. Velma takes a closer look at the contract the ghouls were so desperate to get back, and they realize it's the most important clue so far, so it's trapping time. The boys are bait to lure the three with the paper, perfectly working as they're caught. Unmasking Mamba Wamba, they find none other than Roger himself. Question: how did Mamba Wamba throw a voodoo doll of Roger if Roger is Mamba Wamba? But Roger was also in the room with the rest of the gang the entire time that happened. Otherwise, it should be obvious he was a fake given his pale skin. Also, how did he magically fade through the wall? Anyway, Lila was also in on it, along with some other guy that isn't even named, as they apparently realized the song would become a big hit, wanting the millions to themselves, and cooked up their scheme for the rest of the band to sign the money away to them only, covering up the real intent on the contract.
It's too bad they didn't play it straight. They could have made a bundle manufacturing dolls.
The other two band members cook up some gumbo for everyone, but the frog eats every last bite and they decide to get pizza instead. And that's Scooby-Doo's take on the short story Papa Benjamin, changed now to Mamba Wamba. Given how the short story and certain adaptations use highly racial terms while already dealing in imagery it probably shouldn't be messing with, Scooby was probably better off exchanging some of these elements for something more on brand with how the show already did things. We've seen similar looking witch doctors on the show after all, and they fully reused the zombie design, though zombies didn't exist at all in the original story. The name Mamba Wamba itself is very questionable, but that's another thing we can perhaps throw on the villain. One element that sticks out is the chant, and the consequences that come of it. In the short story and prior adaptations, the curse is real, and those who use the sacred chant for their own profit without thinking are punished by death. In Scooby's take, the only ones punished are Roger, Lila, and their unnamed accomplice. After it's over, Alex still gets to return to his band and perform the song for profit, a song that's basically just performing what is introduced as something sacred and important to another culture or people. Without comments getting upset at me again, Monster Mexico, you don't get more direct with cultural appropriation than that, and he's presented as the innocent here. Those who die in the short story are basically just getting the karma that's coming to them for disrespecting something so important and sacred, for something as selfish as profit no less. And while death might be a little strong, you could definitely say they had something coming to them for it. Reframing it so that Alex is the one who actually deserves to profit off something sacred just because he thinks it sounds cool is kind of weird. It's not the strongest writing choice to make that I believe you could take away from the story's roots. You really just shouldn't be messing with all that stuff at all is the bare minimum you should be taking away. After a while, the episode does devolve into more of your typical Scooby plot rather than adapting the story beats anymore, which comes from having to make those kinds of changes. Removed from its source material, the episode itself is fine. Obviously memorable in its own right given how much it stuck with me over the years. No more directly problematic than any other classic Scooby episode. I'm not saying any of what I have with malice toward the episode. Surprisingly, the story of the episode would actually be resurrected further decades later, in the 2014 direct-to-video film Scooby-Doo, Franken-Creepy, even including classic clips of the episode. The film would see Alex's band be given a name for the first time, now known as Alex Super Experience. At the start of the film, on the web show Jeepers, discovers it's Daphne, a fan of the band asks if the gang is responsible for their breakup, something we don't see at all in the original episode, which they confirm. Spoilers for the movie if you care incoming. One of the villains at the end turns out to be Lila, returning with other former villains, seeking revenge against the gang. It's surprising to see her pulled alongside some of the most iconic villains when I wouldn't have exactly deemed Lila especially memorable in comparison, but it does go to show that the episode still had a lasting impact enough to be remembered by many, just as it has been by myself. But what about you? Is this a classic Scooby-Doo Show episode that stuck with you as well? Or one that you don't quite remember if you've seen it at all? If you do know it, how do you feel about this one? And did you know how deep the source story ran in the blood of the episode? I actually appreciate the episode more now having looked into where it came from, but what about you? I hope you liked the video, because this might be one of my favorites I've made now myself. If you did, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to see what's next, check out the many other videos I've made, follow me on social medias if you want, etc. I'll see you next time in Scooby-Topia. Bye!